The rattling of the key in the lock sealed Olivia Oakes' fate as surely as her brother's cruel words that echoed through the wooden door. "You'll stay locked in this room until you learn your place, sister. Father left me in charge, and I won't have you disgracing our name with your willful ways." The bolt slid home with a terrible finality that sent Olivia's heart plummeting to the dusty floorboards of her bedroom. It was 1879 in the unforgiving territory of Wyoming, and at 20 years old, Olivia had expected more from life than becoming her brother Vernon's prisoner. Their father's death 6 months prior had transformed Vernon from merely difficult to unbearably tyrannical. The thriving cattle ranch their father had built now served as Olivia's gilded cage, with Vernon holding the key. Olivia pressed her palms against the rough-hewn door, feeling the splinters catch at her skin. "Vernon, please, I only went to town to mail a letter. You can't keep me locked up like this." A letter to that schoolteacher, no doubt, Vernon spat from the other side. "I've already arranged your marriage to Harold Fleming. He's willing to take you despite your stubborn nature and has the connections our ranch needs. In 2 weeks, you'll be his problem instead of mine." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Harold Fleming was 53 years old, a widower 3 times over with a reputation that made her skin crawl. "I won't marry him, Vernon. You can't force me. Watch me," came the cold reply. His boot heels struck the wooden floor as he walked away, each step hammering another nail into Olivia's future. She slumped against the door, sliding down until she hit the floor. Her gaze drifted to the window, too small to climb through and too high to reach without assistance. Vernon had thought of everything. 3 days passed in miserable succession. Olivia was allowed out only for brief visits to the necessary house, always under Vernon's watchful eye. Meals were delivered by Marjorie, the housekeeper who avoided Olivia's pleading gaze, too afraid of losing her position to offer help. On the 4th day, while Vernon was occupied with the spring cattle drive preparations, Olivia heard the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching the ranch. Pressing her face against the window, she could just make out a lone rider on a chestnut stallion, his form cutting a striking silhouette against the vast Wyoming sky. Ethan Foster had not planned to stop at the Oakes Ranch. Fresh from a 3-year stint working cattle drives between Texas and Montana, he was merely passing through on his way to the promise of steady work at a ranch near Laramie. But something about the place caught his attention, perhaps the magnificent spread of land, or the unusually quiet yard that should have been bustling with activity. At 25, Ethan had seen enough of the world to know when something wasn't right. He guided his horse toward the main house, dust kicking up under the animal's hooves. The place looked prosperous enough, a large 2-story home with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and fences stretching toward the horizon where cattle dotted the landscape. As he approached, Ethan noticed movement in an upstairs window. A woman's face appeared briefly before disappearing. Something in her expression, desperation, perhaps tugged at him. He dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. The front door opened before he could knock, revealing a stern-faced man with cold eyes and a tight mouth. "What's your business here?" the man demanded, hand hovering near the pistol at his hip. Ethan removed his hat, keeping his demeanor relaxed despite the hostility radiating from the man. "Name's Ethan Foster. Just passing through and thought I might inquire about work. Your spread looks like it could use an extra hand." The man, Vernon Oakes, as he curtly introduced himself, seemed to consider this. His eyes narrowed as he studied Ethan's weather-beaten face and capable hands. "We're managing just fine," Vernon said, but then his gaze shifted to the cattle in the distance. "Though I suppose we could use help with the spring drive. Can you handle yourself on horseback?" "Been riding since before I could walk," Ethan replied. It wasn't an exaggeration. Life on the frontier had made him a skilled horseman by necessity. Vernon nodded briskly. "You can stay in the bunkhouse with the other hands, $1 a day plus meals. Work starts at dawn." Ethan accepted with a nod, carefully hiding his curiosity about the woman in the window. As Vernon led him to the bunkhouse, Ethan glanced up at the 2nd story of the main house. The curtain at one window moved slightly, and for just a moment he caught another glimpse of a young woman's face, pale and lovely, with eyes that seemed to call out for help. In her locked room, Olivia watched the stranger being led to the bunkhouse. There was something different about this cowboy, a quiet strength in the way he carried himself, an alertness in his gaze that had swept across the ranch and, for one heart-stopping moment, connected with her own. Hope, fragile as a newly hatched bird, stirred in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, this stranger might be her way out. The next morning, Olivia awoke to the sound of men's voices in the yard. Peering out her window, she saw Vernon gesturing toward the northern pasture while speaking to the new cowboy. Even from a distance, she could see the stranger was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair. He nodded at whatever Vernon was saying, but then, as if sensing her gaze, he glanced up toward her window. Olivia stepped back quickly, her heart racing. Had he seen her? And if he had, would it matter? What could one cowboy do against her brother and his iron rule? Ethan Foster had indeed seen her. As he rode out with Vernon to check the herd, his mind kept returning to the woman in the window. Something wasn't right at the Oakes ranch, and it wasn't just the tension among the other hands or the way Vernon barked orders like a military commander. "Your sister not feeling well?" Ethan asked casually as they rode side by side. Vernon's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "What do you know about my sister?" Ethan shrugged, keeping his expression neutral. "Nothing. Just noticed the curtains moving upstairs. Figured it might be family." "My sister is indisposed," Vernon said stiffly, "and not a concern of yours." "Of course," Ethan replied, but filed away the defensive reaction. Throughout the day, Ethan worked alongside the other ranch hands, cutting out cattle for the drive and mending fences. He used the opportunity to strike up conversations, carefully extracting information about the Oakes family. "Shame about old man Oakes passing," said one weathered cowboy named Pete. "He was fair, that one. His son's got a different way about him." "And the daughter," Ethan ventured. Pete glanced around before answering. "Miss Olivia's a spirited one, kind to everyone, smart as a whip. Been different since her pa died, though. Vernon keeps her close to home these days." "Too close, if you ask me," muttered another hand, who quickly fell silent when Pete shot him a warning look. By evening, Ethan had pieced together enough to know that Olivia Oakes was effectively a prisoner in her own home. Vernon had apparently locked her away after catching her attempting to flee an arranged marriage to a wealthy rancher old enough to be her father. As darkness fell, Ethan watched the main house from the bunkhouse doorway. A light burned in the upstairs window, Olivia's room, he guessed. Another light moved through the downstairs rooms as Vernon completed his nightly routine. When the downstairs went dark, Ethan waited another hour before making his move. The ranch was silent, the other hands asleep or pretending to be. He slipped out into the moonlit yard, moving with the quiet confidence of a man used to avoiding trouble. The rear entrance to the house was locked, but the kitchen window had a broken latch, a detail Ethan had noticed earlier. He eased it open and slipped inside, pausing to let his eyes adjust to the darkness. Navigating through the silent house, he made his way upstairs, wincing at each creaking floorboard. At the top of the stairs, he hesitated. 4 doors lined the hallway. Which one was Olivia's? The answer came in the form of a heavy padlock on the second door. Ethan's jaw tightened at the sight. What kind of man locked up his own sister? He tapped lightly on the door. "Miss Oakes," he whispered. The silence stretched for a long moment before a hesitant voice replied. "Who's there?" "Ethan Foster, madam. New hand your brother hired. Are you all right in there?" He heard movement on the other side of the door, then her voice came again, closer this time. "He's locked me in. Please, can you help me?" Ethan examined the padlock. "Stand back from the door, Miss Oakes. I'm going to try something." He retrieved a small leather pouch from his pocket, tools of a misspent youth that occasionally still proved useful. Within minutes, he'd picked the lock and eased the door open. Olivia Oakes stood in the center of the room, her honey blonde hair falling in waves around her shoulders, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. She wore a simple nightgown covered by a shawl hastily wrapped around her shoulders. "You came," she whispered, as if she couldn't quite believe it. I saw you at the window, Ethan explained. Figured something wasn't right. Olivia glanced nervously toward the hallway. Vernon sleeps lightly. If he catches you here, then we'd best be quick, Ethan said. Gather what you need. I'm getting you out of here. Olivia hesitated only briefly before springing into action. She changed behind a screen while Ethan kept watch at the door, then quickly packed a small bag with essentials. Within minutes, she was ready, dressed in a simple riding skirt and blouse, her hair hastily pinned up. Where will we go? She asked, clutching her bag. I know a place a few miles from here, old line shack, where we can lay low until morning, then we'll figure out the next step. They crept down the stairs, freezing when one let out a particularly loud creak. After a breathless moment of silence, they continued to the kitchen, and out through the window Ethan had used to enter. The night air was cool against Olivia's skin as she followed Ethan to the stables. Freedom was so close she could taste it, bitter and sweet on her tongue. Ethan saddled his chestnut stallion, then helped Olivia prepare her own mount, a dappled mare that nickered softly in recognition of her mistress. Easy, girl, Olivia whispered, stroking the mare's nose. We need to be quiet now. Just as they led the horses from the stable, a lamp flared to life on the porch of the main house. Vernon stood there in his nightshirt, a rifle gleaming in his hands. I knew you were trouble the moment you rode in, he called to Ethan, his voice cutting through the night. Step away from my sister, Cowboy, or I'll put a bullet in you. Ethan moved to position himself between Olivia and her brother. Miss Oakes isn't your property, Oakes. She's a grown woman who can make her own choices. Vernon laughed coldly. Is that what she told you? My sister's not right in the head, has fanciful notions that could get her killed out there. I'm protecting her. By locking her up, Ethan challenged. By forcing her to marry a man 3 times her age, Vernon's face contorted with rage. That's family business, none of yours. He raised the rifle. Last chance, step aside. Instead of obeying, Ethan lunged forward, closing the distance between them with surprising speed. Vernon fired, the bullet whistling past Ethan's ear as he tackled the older man to the ground. The rifle clattered away as they grappled in the dirt. Vernon might have been older, but he was strong and fought with the desperation of a man protecting what he believed was his. His fist connected with Ethan's jaw, sending pain radiating through his skull. Ethan responded with a punch of his own, catching Vernon in the stomach. The fight was brutal and quick, ending when Ethan managed to pin Vernon to the ground. It's over, Oakes, Ethan panted. Let her go. She's all I have left, Vernon gasped, sudden anguish breaking through his anger. Father left me to protect her. Locking her away isn't protection, Ethan said firmly. It's control. By now, the commotion had drawn the other ranch hands from the bunkhouse. They stood awkwardly in the yard, uncertain whose side to take. Olivia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. Vernon, I'm leaving. Not because I don't love you or this ranch, but because I can't live as your prisoner. Father would never have wanted this for me. Vernon's resistance seemed to crumble at her words. He sagged against the ground, no longer fighting Ethan's hold. You'll die out there, he muttered. I'd rather die free than live caged, Olivia replied with quiet dignity. Ethan released Vernon and backed toward the horses, keeping a wary eye on the man. We'll be going now, he said, helping Olivia mount her mare. Vernon struggled to his feet, brushing dirt from his nightshirt. For a moment, it seemed he might reach for the fallen rifle, but instead he just watched as Ethan swung onto his own horse. She'll come back, Vernon called as they rode away. When she sees how harsh the world really is, she'll come crawling back. His words faded behind them as they urged their horses into a gallop, leaving the Oakes ranch behind. The night wind whipped Olivia's hair free from its pins, streaming behind her like a golden banner of newfound freedom. They rode hard for nearly an hour, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the ranch. Olivia followed Ethan's lead without question, trusting this stranger who had risked everything to help her. Finally, they reached a small line shack nestled in a grove of cottonwoods. It was a humble structure, just one room with a stone fireplace and rough furnishings, but to Olivia, it looked like a palace of freedom. Ethan helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "It's not much," he said apologetically as he led her inside. "But it's dry and relatively clean." Olivia looked around at the simple shelter, a far cry from the comfortable ranch house she'd grown up in. Yet something about the humble space made her heart lighter than it had been in months. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. Ethan busied himself starting a fire while Olivia explored the small space. A narrow cot stood against one wall, a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs occupied the center, and a few shelves held basic supplies. "Why did you help me?" Olivia asked as the fire caught, casting flickering light across Ethan's features. "You don't know me. You could have been killed." Ethan paused in his work, straightening to look at her. "I've seen too many people trapped in situations not of their making when I saw you in that window." He shrugged. "Let's just say I couldn't ride away knowing what I knew." Olivia studied him in the firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the kindness in his eyes that belied his rugged exterior. "Thank you," she said simply. "I was beginning to lose hope." They stayed awake long into the night, talking in low voices as the fire crackled. Olivia told him about her father's death, Vernon's gradual transformation from protective brother to jailer, and the arranged marriage to Harold Fleming that had been the final straw. "Fleming's known for running through wives," she explained, shuddering. "3 already, all dead before their time. Some say it's bad luck, but others whisper it's something worse." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Your brother would marry you to such a man. Fleming has connections to the railroad." "Vernon needs those connections to expand the ranch." Olivia's voice was bitter. "I'm just a commodity to be traded." In turn, Ethan shared pieces of his own story growing up on a small farm in Missouri, losing his parents to fever when he was 16, working his way west with cattle drives and odd jobs. "I've been drifting for nearly 10 years, he admitted. Never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots. As dawn approached, exhaustion finally overcame them. Ethan insisted Olivia take the cot while he made do with a bedroll on the floor. "What happens now?" Olivia asked sleepily as she settled under the thin blanket. "We get some rest," Ethan replied. "Then tomorrow we figure out where you want to go. It's your life, Miss Oakes. Your choice." The idea of choice, so simple yet so profound, followed Olivia into her dreams. Morning brought clarity and new challenges. They couldn't stay at the line shack for long. Vernon might guess where they'd gone, and even if he didn't, the shack was occasionally used by other ranch hands. Over a breakfast of coffee and jerky, they discussed options. "I have an aunt in Denver," Olivia said. "She wrote after father died, offering me a place to stay, but Vernon intercepted the letters. I only found out when Marjorie slipped and mentioned it." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Denver's a good distance. We'd need supplies, better horses for the journey." "I have money," Olivia offered. "Not much, but enough for supplies. Father left me a small inheritance that Vernon couldn't touch. I sewed the bank draft into the lining of my bag before Vernon locked me up." Ethan's eyebrows rose in appreciation. "Smart thinking." "I've had months to plan an escape," Olivia admitted. "Just never had the means to execute it until you came along." They decided to head for the town of Sweetwater, 20 miles east. It was far enough from the Oakes ranch to be relatively safe, but large enough to have the supplies they needed. The ride to Sweetwater took most of the day. They kept to less traveled paths, ever watchful for signs of pursuit. Olivia rode with growing confidence, her back straight, her face tilted toward the sun she'd been denied for too long. Ethan found himself watching her more often than he should, admiring the determined set of her jaw and the graceful way she handled her horse. There was strength in this woman that had nothing to do with physical power, a resilience that had survived months of captivity without breaking. They reached Sweetwater as the sun was setting, the small town coming alive with evening activities. Lights glowed in saloon windows, and the sound of a piano drifted through the air. "We should find somewhere to stay first," Ethan suggested, helping Olivia dismount in front of a modest hotel. "Then I'll see about supplies while you rest." The hotel clerk barely glanced at them as they signed the register, Ethan as Mr. Foster and Olivia as Mrs. Foster. The pretense of marriage was necessary to avoid scandal, though the thought of it brought color to Olivia's cheeks. "I've put you in our best room," the clerk said, handing over a key. "End of the hall, nice and quiet." The best room was small but clean, with a double bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a chair by the window. Olivia stood awkwardly just inside the door, suddenly very aware of their situation. "I'll sleep on the floor," Ethan said quickly, reading her discomfort. "I've slept on worse." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Olivia's chest. "Thank you for everything." While Olivia freshened up, Ethan went to secure supplies. The general store was still open, and he purchased what they would need for the journey to Denver: food, ammunition, medical supplies, and a few items of clothing for Olivia, guessing at her size. As he was leaving the store, a poster in the window caught his eye. His stomach dropped as he read the bold letters. Reward $200 for information leading to the return of Olivia Oakes and the capture of her abductor. The poster described Olivia and included a crude sketch of a man who bore only a passing resemblance to Ethan, but was close enough to be concerning. The description claimed Olivia was mentally unsound and had been kidnapped by a dangerous drifter. Vernon had moved quickly. The reward would turn every head in the territory their way. Ethan hurried back to the hotel, taking a circuitous route to ensure he wasn't followed. When he entered the room, Olivia was standing by the window, her damp hair hanging loose down her back. She'd washed away the dust of their journey and changed into the hotel-provided robe while her clothes dried over a chair. She turned at his entrance, a smile forming that quickly faded when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" Ethan set down the supplies and told her about the poster. Olivia's face paled, but she didn't crumble as many might have. "He's desperate," she said. "And he knows how to use the law to his advantage. We need to leave at first light," Ethan said. "Take a different route than we planned. Vernon will have men watching the main roads to Denver." Olivia nodded, her practical nature asserting itself. "There's a trading post about 3 days' ride south. My father used to do business there. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, might help us." "You trust this Jenkins?" "He never cared for Vernon," Olivia said with a small smile, "and he has connections with the stagecoach lines. If we can get to him, he might be able to arrange passage for me to Denver." Ethan caught the phrasing. "For you, not us." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I can't ask you to keep risking your life for me, Ethan. You've already done more than enough. Once I'm safely on my way to Denver, you could go wherever you were headed before all this." The thought of parting ways left a hollow feeling in Ethan's chest, surprising in its intensity. In just 2 days, this woman had somehow become important to him. "Let's get to the trading post first," he said. "Then we'll decide the next step." They ate a simple meal in the room, not daring to venture to the hotel dining room where they might be recognized. As they prepared for sleep, an awkward dance of politeness ensued, with Ethan insisting on the floor and Olivia reluctantly taking the bed. "This is ridiculous," Olivia finally said. "The bed is large enough for both of us if we stay to our sides. You need proper rest as much as I do if we're to travel safely tomorrow." Ethan hesitated, torn between propriety and practicality. "Are you certain?" "I trust you," Olivia said simply. "You've proven yourself honorable in every way." Those 3 words, "I trust you," hit Ethan with unexpected force. Trust was a rare commodity in his world, especially from someone with every reason to be wary of men and their intentions. They lay side by side in the darkness, a respectful distance between them, yet Ethan was acutely aware of Olivia's presence, the soft sound of her breathing, the faint scent of hotel soap in her hair. "Ethan," her voice came softly through the darkness. "Yes, what will you do after?" "When this is over," he considered the question. "I was headed to a ranch near Laramie, promised job waiting, a good one, decent wages, chance to work with horses which I prefer to cattle." He paused. "What about you, in Denver, I mean?" Olivia was quiet for a moment. "My aunt runs a millinery shop. She offered to teach me the business. It's not what I dreamed of, but it's honest work and freedom to make my own choices." "What did you dream of?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Another pause, longer this time. "A home of my own, land maybe." Not as grand as my father's ranch, but somewhere beautiful, somewhere I could build something lasting. Her voice grew softer. Someone to share it with who sees me as a partner, not property. The simple honesty of her dream resonated with something deep in Ethan's chest, a longing he'd buried beneath years of drifting and temporary connections. "That's a good dream," he said quietly. They fell asleep that way, side by side in the darkness, each holding their dreams close like fragile birds that might fly away if examined too closely. Morning came with a soft knocking at their door. Ethan was instantly alert, motioning for Olivia to stay quiet as he reached for his pistol. "Who is it?" he called. "Message for Mr. Foster," came a boy's voice. Ethan cracked the door open. A young lad of about 12 stood in the hallway, cap in hand. "Man at the livery stable says to tell you your horses are ready, sir. And also that some men were asking about new arrivals in town, said they looked like trouble." Ethan pressed a coin into the boy's hand. "Thanks, son. Did the livery man say anything else?" The boy nodded. "Said to tell you the back door's open if you need it." After the boy left, Ethan turned to Olivia, who was already dressing hurriedly behind the screen. "Vernon's men are in town," he said grimly. "We need to move now." They gathered their supplies and crept down the back stairs of the hotel, emerging into an alley that ran behind the main street. The morning was just beginning, with few people about as they made their way to the livery stable. The liveryman, a grizzled old fellow with kind eyes, nodded to them as they entered. "Figured you might be the folks those men are looking for. Don't know what your story is and don't need to. But I know trouble when I see it, and those men are trouble." "We're much obliged for the warning," Ethan said, helping Olivia mount her horse. "Took the liberty of packing some extra supplies," the liveryman added, pointing to the saddlebags. "And there's a trail behind my place that joins up with the old mining road, less traveled if you take my meaning." Ethan pressed extra coins into the man's hand. "We're in your debt." They slipped out the back of the livery as the liveryman had suggested, finding the trail that wound through a stand of trees before connecting with a narrow, rocky path that had once served nearby mines. They rode hard for several hours, the terrain growing increasingly rugged as they headed south. By midday, they paused to rest the horses beside a small creek. "Do you think we've lost them?" Olivia asked, splashing cool water on her face. Ethan scanned the horizon. "For now. But Vernon's not likely to give up easily. $200 is a lot of money." "It's not about the money for him," Olivia said, her expression troubled. "It's about control. Vernon can't stand to lose anything he considers his." They continued their journey, the landscape gradually changing from rolling hills to more dramatic terrain, with red rock formations rising against the sky. The old mining road wound through canyons and across plateaus, a challenging route that would discourage casual pursuit. By late afternoon, storm clouds were gathering in the west. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain, a mixed blessing. While it would wash away their tracks, it also meant a difficult night ahead if they couldn't find shelter. "There should be an abandoned mining camp a few miles ahead," Ethan said, studying the darkening sky. "Not much, but better than being caught in the open when that storm hits." They pushed on, the first fat raindrops beginning to fall as they spotted the dilapidated structures of the old camp. 3 small cabins remained partially standing, surrounded by the collapsed remnants of others. They chose the most intact cabin, leading the horses into what had once been a storage shed attached to the main structure. Inside, the cabin was dusty but provided solid shelter from the storm that was now raging in earnest. Ethan managed to get a fire going in the small stone fireplace while Olivia arranged their supplies. The single room was intimate in its confinement, forcing a proximity that both found increasingly difficult to ignore. As thunder crashed outside and rain lashed against the windows, they shared a meal of jerky and biscuits from their supplies. The firelight cast a warm glow over Olivia's features, highlighting the gold in her hair and the determined set of her jaw. "Tell me about your home in Missouri," she said, breaking a companionable silence. "What was it like?" Ethan's expression softened with memory. "Small farm, nothing special." But the land was good rich soil, a creek running through it. My mother kept a garden that was the envy of the county. You miss it, Olivia observed. Parts of it, he admitted. Not enough to go back, too many ghosts. Olivia nodded in understanding. That's how I feel about the ranch now. It was home once, but after Father died and Vernon changed. The ghosts are too fresh. Another crack of thunder shook the cabin and Olivia jumped slightly. Without thinking, Ethan reached out to steady her, his hand coming to rest on hers. The contact sent a current of awareness through both of them. Sorry, Ethan said, starting to withdraw his hand. Olivia turned her palm up, catching his fingers before he could pull away. Don't be. Their eyes met across the small space, something unspoken passing between them. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, they leaned toward each other. Ethan's free hand rose to gently cup Olivia's cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Olivia, he murmured, her name a question and a plea. Yes, she whispered, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened, months of Olivia's isolation and years of Ethan's loneliness dissolving in the warmth they found in each other. Her hands moved to his shoulders, feeling the strength there as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, eyes wide with the sudden shift in their relationship. I shouldn't have done that, Ethan said, though he made no move to increase the distance between them. Why not? Olivia challenged, her voice soft but steady. You're vulnerable. On the run, I don't want to take advantage. Olivia pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. I've spent months having every choice taken from me. This, she said, gesturing between them, is my choice, mine alone. The fierce independence in her eyes convinced him more than her words. This was not a woman acting out of gratitude or confusion, but one who knew her own mind. Still, Ethan said, taking her hands in his, we should be sure. There's no rush, Olivia. Whatever's between us, it can grow in its own time. She smiled then, a true smile that lit her entire face. When did you get so wise, Ethan Foster? Not wise, he corrected. Just old enough to know that some things are worth waiting for. They slept that night on opposite sides of the cabin, but something fundamental had changed between them. A door had been opened that could not be closed again. Morning brought clearing skies and renewed determination. They set out early, making good progress on the drying trails. By midday, they crossed a ridge that offered a panoramic view of the valley below, where a river wound like a silver ribbon through the landscape. Jenkins' trading post is near that bend in the river, Olivia said, pointing. We could be there by sunset if we push on. They were making their way down a steep trail when Ethan's horse suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. What is it, boy? Ethan murmured, scanning their surroundings. The answer came in the form of 3 riders emerging from a copse of trees ahead, blocking their path. Ethan recognized the lead rider immediately, one of Vernon's men from the ranch. Well, look what we found, the man called, a triumphant grin spreading across his weathered face. Boss will be mighty pleased. Ethan slowly moved his horse in front of Olivia's. We don't want trouble, boys, just passing through. Too late for that, another rider said, patting the rifle resting across his saddle. There's $200 with your name on it, mister, and the boss wants his sister back home where she belongs. Olivia's voice rang out clear and strong. I'm not going back, Frank. Vernon has no right to keep me prisoner. The lead rider, Frank, shook his head. That's not how the boss sees it, Miss Olivia. He says you're not thinking straight, says this drifter's turned your head. The only one who turned my head was Vernon when he slapped me for refusing to marry Harold Fleming, Olivia retorted. Frank had the grace to look uncomfortable at that. Not our business, madam. We just do as we're told. And if I refuse to go with you? Olivia challenged. Frank's hand moved to his pistol. Then we take you anyway, and your friend here doesn't make it to sundown. Ethan's mind raced, assessing their options. 3 against 1 weren't good odds, especially with Olivia's safety to consider. Fighting would likely get them both killed. How about we talk this through? Ethan suggested, keeping his voice level. Surely there's a solution that works for everyone. Nothing to talk about, Frank replied. You're coming with us, both of you. Boss can decide what to do with you when we get back to the ranch. Ethan was about to respond when a shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt near Frank's horse. The animal reared in panic, nearly unseating its rider. That's far enough, called a new voice. All heads turned to see an older man positioned on a rocky outcropping above them, rifle aimed steadily at Frank. Jenkins, Olivia breathed in relief. The traitor kept his aim on Frank. Miss Oakes is under my protection now, boys. I suggest you ride on back and tell Vernon his sister is no longer his concern. Frank's face darkened with anger. This isn't your fight, old man. When Vernon Oakes starts offering bounties for innocent women, it becomes everyone's fight, Jenkins replied. Now drop your weapons or the next shot won't be a warning. For a tense moment, it seemed Frank might risk a shootout, but as he glanced up, he noticed several more armed men emerging from concealed positions around them. The odds had suddenly shifted dramatically. With a curse, Frank signaled his companions to lower their weapons. This isn't over, he spat. Vernon won't stop until he gets her back. Then he'll be waiting a long time, Jenkins said firmly. Now ride out and don't let me catch you on my land again. With venomous glares, the three men turned their horses and rode back the way they had come. Only when they were out of sight did Jenkins lower his rifle and signal to Ethan and Olivia. Come on up to the trading post, he called. Looks like you two could use a safe place to rest. The trading post was larger than Ethan had expected, a substantial log structure with attached storerooms and stables. Built on a rise overlooking the river, it commanded a strategic view of the surrounding area. Jenkins, a barrel-chested man with a silver beard and sharp eyes, welcomed them into the main building. Been expecting you, Miss Olivia, he said. Word travels fast in these parts. Heard Vernon was offering a reward for a kidnapped sister and figured there was more to the story. How did you know we'd come this way? Ethan asked, still wary despite the man's apparent friendliness. Jenkins smiled. Where else would she go? I'm the only friend her father had within 100 miles who isn't afraid of Vernon Oakes. He turned to Olivia. Your father was a good man, Miss Olivia. He'd be spinning in his grave if he knew what Vernon's been up to. Over a hearty meal, they explained their situation to Jenkins, who listened with growing concern. Vernon's always been a hard one, he said when they finished. But locking you up and forcing a marriage, that's beyond the pale. Can you help us get to Denver? Olivia asked. I have an aunt there who will take me in. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. Stage comes through here every Tuesday, heading east. That's 3 days from now. He glanced at Ethan. Problem is, Vernon's men will be watching for you both, and that poster he circulated gives him the law's backing. What if we could prove the charges false? Ethan suggested. Show that Olivia isn't mentally unsound and wasn't kidnapped. Might work, Jenkins agreed. But you'd need witnesses, documentation. Vernon's got influence in these parts. Olivia's expression brightened suddenly. Father's will. Vernon told me I was only left a small sum, but what if there was more? What if father left provisions Vernon has hidden from me? Jenkins stroked his beard. Your father's lawyer was in Sweetwater Hargrove, I believe. If anyone would know the true contents of the will, it would be him. Sweetwater's too dangerous, Ethan objected. Vernon's men are already there. I've got a man heading that way tomorrow with supplies, Jenkins offered. He could deliver a message to Hargrove, ask him to bring any relevant documents here. It was a risk, but potentially their best option. If the will contained provisions that gave Olivia more independence than Vernon had claimed, it could undermine his legal authority over her. There's something else to consider, Jenkins said carefully. The marriage Vernon arranged. Fleming's a powerful man with connections to the territorial judge. If there's a signed marriage contract, it might complicate matters. Olivia paled. I never signed anything, but Vernon might have forged my signature. Then we need to move quickly, Ethan said, before Fleming gets involved directly. Jenkins assigned them a small cabin behind the main, building a single room similar to where they'd sheltered during the storm, but with better furnishings and a proper bed. Again, Ethan offered to sleep elsewhere, but Jenkins waved off his concerns. You two are adults. the trader said bluntly. And from what I can see, you care about each other. What happens between you is your business, not mine. Left alone in the cabin, Ethan and Olivia found themselves in another moment of decision. The kiss they'd shared the previous night hung between them, unacknowledged but impossible to forget. Jenkins seems confident he can help, Ethan said, breaking the silence as he stoked the small fire. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, untying her boots. He was always kind to me when Father brought me here as a child. Vernon never liked him, said he was too familiar with the local tribes, too quick to give fair deals instead of pressing advantages. Sounds like a man of principle, Ethan observed. Like you, Olivia said softly. Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze across the room. I'm no saint, Olivia. I never said you were, she stood, crossing to where he knelt by the fire. But you risked your life for a woman you didn't know, expecting nothing in return. That takes a certain kind of principle. He rose to face her, acutely aware of how close they were standing. Maybe I did expect something, he admitted. Not at first, but now. Olivia's hand came to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. What do you expect now, Ethan Foster? The honesty in her eyes demanded honesty in return, more than I have any right to ask for. Ask anyway, she whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. When this is over, when you're safe in Denver with your aunt, I want a chance to court you properly, to see if what's growing between us could become something lasting. A smile bloomed on Olivia's face, radiant in its joy. I'd like that very much. This time when they kissed, there was no hesitation, no doubt. It was a promise and a beginning, sealed with the press of lips and the gentle exploration of hands learning the contours of shoulders, waists, the curve of a cheek. They moved to the bed, their passion tempered by tenderness, and the knowledge that they had time, that this wasn't a desperate grasp at connection before parting, but the first careful steps toward something enduring. When they finally lay together, clothes disheveled but still largely in place, Ethan traced the line of Olivia's jaw with his fingertips. We should wait, he murmured. Do this right. Olivia caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm. You're a good man, Ethan Foster. I'm trying to be, he replied with a rueful smile. It's not easy with you looking at me like that, she laughed, the sound washing over him like summer rain. We have time, she agreed. I'm not going anywhere without you. They fell asleep in each other's arms, more secure in their future than either had felt in years. The next 3 days passed in a curious mix of tension and contentment. While they waited for news from Sweetwater and kept watch for Vernon's men, Ethan and Olivia found themselves settling into a comfortable rhythm together. Ethan helped around the trading post, impressing Jenkins with his work ethic and knowledge of horses. Olivia assisted in the store, her natural charm and intelligence making her popular with customers, including the local tribespeople who traded regularly with Jenkins. In the evenings, they shared meals with Jenkins and his small staff, then retired to their cabin where they talked late into the night, learning each other's histories, dreams, and fears. Their physical relationship remained chaste but affectionate, both understanding that their circumstances demanded patience. On the afternoon before the stagecoach was due to arrive, Jenkins' messenger returned from Sweetwater, accompanied by a distinguished older man whom Jenkins introduced as Mr. Hargrove, the lawyer. Miss Oakes, Hargrove said, bowing slightly to Olivia. I've been quite concerned since hearing of your situation. Your brother told me you had gone to stay with relatives after your father's death. I had no idea he had essentially imprisoned you. Then you believe me? Olivia asked, hope rising in her voice. I do indeed, Hargrove confirmed. And I've brought documents that should help your case considerably. They gathered in Jenkins' private office as Hargrove laid out several papers on the desk. First, there is the matter of your father's will. Vernon did not lie about your inheritance, but he omitted crucial details. Hargrove pointed to a paragraph in the formal document. Your father left you not only a sum of money, but also the eastern section of the ranch, approximately 500 acres, including the land along Silver Creek. It was meant to be your dowry or, should you choose not to marry, your own property to manage as you see fit. Olivia's eyes widened. I had no idea. Furthermore, Hargrove continued, while Vernon was named as your guardian, that guardianship was to end upon your 21st birthday or upon your marriage to a man of your choosing. The key phrase being of your choosing. My birthday is in 3 weeks, Olivia said softly. Hargrove nodded. Which explains Vernon's haste in arranging your marriage to Fleming. Once you turn 21, he loses all legal authority over you and your portion of the ranch. What about the marriage contract with Fleming? Ethan asked, the concern that had been weighing on him finally voiced. Hargrove's expression turned grim. That is the other matter I must address. There is indeed a contract signed by Vernon and Fleming. He paused. It also bears what purports to be your signature, Miss Oakes. A forgery, Olivia stated firmly. I never signed anything. I suspected as much, Hargrove said, which is why I brought this. He produced another document, a deed Olivia had signed shortly after her father's death, transferring a small parcel of land to a longtime ranch hand as a retirement gift. This contains your authentic signature. If necessary, we can prove the one on the marriage contract is false. Ethan felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. So Vernon has no legal right to force Olivia to return or to marry Fleming. Not quite so simple, Hargrove cautioned. Until Miss Oakes turns 21, Vernon remains her legal guardian. However, if we can prove his mistreatment and the forgery, a judge might rule in her favor immediately. And the kidnapping charge against Ethan, Olivia pressed. That becomes moot if you testify you left willingly, Hargrove explained. Especially with evidence of your confinement, Jenkins, who had been listening silently, spoke up. So what's the best course of action? Should they still take tomorrow's stage to Denver? Hargrove considered this. Denver would put you beyond Vernon's immediate reach. Give us time to present our case to the territorial court. He looked to Olivia. But ultimately, Miss Oakes, the decision is yours. Olivia glanced at Ethan, then back to the lawyer. I want my land, she said firmly. I want what my father intended me to have. Running to Denver feels like letting Vernon win. It's not running, Ethan said gently. It's strategic retreat. Perhaps, Olivia conceded, but I'm tired of Vernon controlling my life. 3 more weeks and I'm legally free of him. I want to stand my ground. Jenkins scratched his beard thoughtfully. Might be another option. Judge Wilson is due in Clearwater next week for the regular circuit court. Clearwater's just 2 days' ride from here, and Wilson's known to be fair-minded. Hargrove nodded slowly. Wilson would be sympathetic to Miss Oakes' case, especially with the evidence we have. If he ruled in her favor, she could claim her inheritance immediately. And what about Vernon? Ethan asked. He won't take this lying down. Once a judge rules, Vernon would be legally bound to comply, Hargrove said. Defying a court order would put him in serious jeopardy. They debated the options well into the evening, weighing risks against potential rewards. In the end, Olivia's determination swayed them. They would ride to Clearwater, present their case to Judge Wilson, and hope for a favorable ruling. That night, as they prepared for bed in their cabin, Ethan watched Olivia brush her hair by the fire. The simple, domestic act stirred something profound in him, a longing for permanence he'd never allowed himself to feel before. Are you sure about this? He asked. Denver would be safer. Olivia set down her brush, turning to face him. I've been running scared for months, Ethan. I can't do it anymore. I need to face Vernon, to stand up for myself once and for all. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. Then I'll be right beside you. I know you will, she said softly. That's why I can be brave. Ethan pulled her gently into his arms. You were brave long before you met me, Olivia Oakes. I'm just lucky enough to witness it. She rose on tiptoe to kiss him, a kiss that quickly deepened with the emotions of the day. This time when they moved to the bed, there was no hesitation, no holding back. Clothes were set aside with reverent hands, skin explored with tender curiosity. In the flickering firelight, they came together as equals, each giving freely what had never been demanded. For Olivia, it was an act of reclamation, her body and heart finally her own to give. For Ethan, it was a homecoming he'd never expected to find. Afterward, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Ethan traced patterns on Olivia's bare shoulder. "When this is over," he murmured, "when you have your land and your freedom, what then?" Olivia propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dying firelight. "I was hoping we might build something together, if that's what you want too." The vulnerability in her expression nearly undid him. "It's all I want," he admitted. "A home, land of our own, you." She smiled, laying her head on his chest. "Then that's what we'll fight for." The journey to Clearwater was tense but uneventful. Jenkins provided them with fresh horses and supplies, and Hargrove accompanied them, his presence lending legitimacy to their mission. They took back roads and game trails, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Vernon's men might be watching. Clearwater proved to be larger than Ethan had expected, a growing town with aspirations of importance. The courthouse stood at its center, a substantial building of brick and timber that spoke of permanence and authority. They secured rooms at a reputable hotel, Hargrove insisting on propriety now that they were in the public eye. "Appearances matter in legal proceedings," he explained. "We want Judge Wilson to see Miss Oakes as the respectable young woman she is." The judge was scheduled to hear cases the following morning. Hargrove spent the evening preparing their presentation, coaching Olivia on what to expect and how to address the court. "Speak clearly and truthfully," he advised. "Judge Wilson values honesty above all else." Morning found them at the courthouse, Olivia dressed in her best riding skirt and blouse, her hair neatly pinned. Ethan wore the new shirt Jenkins had insisted on giving him, feeling uncomfortably formal but understanding the necessity. They were waiting outside the courtroom when a commotion at the main entrance drew their attention. Vernon Oakes strode in, flanked by two men and accompanied by a portly, well-dressed gentleman whom Ethan immediately pegged as Harold Fleming. "He knows we're here," Ethan muttered, instinctively moving closer to Olivia. Hargrove nodded grimly. "I suspected he might." News travels fast and Vernon has connections. Vernon spotted them almost immediately, his face darkening with rage. He started toward them, only to be intercepted by the court bailiff who directed him to wait on the opposite side of the hallway. From across the space, Vernon's eyes bored into Olivia. "This changes nothing, sister," he called. "You're still coming home with me." Olivia straightened her spine, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Not today, Vernon, not ever again." Before Vernon could respond, the courtroom doors opened, and they were ushered inside. Judge Wilson, a stern-faced man with penetrating eyes and silver at his temples, surveyed the assembled parties with careful neutrality. "I understand we have a matter of guardianship and inheritance to resolve," he said once they were seated. "Mr. Hargrove, you may present your case." Hargrove rose with dignified confidence. "Your Honor, I represent Miss Olivia Oakes, who seeks to be released from her brother's guardianship and to claim the inheritance left to her by her late father, Jonathan Oakes." Over the next hour, Hargrove methodically laid out their case, presenting the will, the forged marriage contract, and Olivia's authentic signature for comparison. Olivia testified about her confinement, speaking with a composure that impressed even Ethan, who knew how deeply Vernon's betrayal had hurt her. When it was Vernon's turn, he painted a picture of a grieving, unstable sister who needed protection from her own poor judgment, and from men who would take advantage of her vulnerability. "This drifter," Vernon said, pointing at Ethan, "broke into our home and abducted my sister, filling her head with promises while eyeing her inheritance. She's not in her right mind, Your Honor. As her guardian, I only want what's best for her." Fleming testified next, describing himself as a devoted suitor concerned only for Olivia's welfare. His pompous manner and condescending tone did him no favors with the judge, whose expression grew increasingly skeptical. When both sides had presented their cases, Judge Wilson called a brief recess to consider his ruling. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as they waited, Vernon glaring at Olivia and Ethan from across the aisle. Finally, Judge Wilson returned, his expression grave as he took his seat. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented, I find several matters of concern," he began. "The will of Jonathan Oakes is clear regarding his daughter's inheritance and the terms of her guardianship. The attempt to arrange a marriage without her consent, particularly using what appears to be a forged signature, suggests an abuse of that guardianship. Vernon shifted uncomfortably in his seat as the judge continued. Furthermore, the confinement described by Miss Oakes constitutes unlawful imprisonment, regardless of Mr. Oakes' claimed concerns for his sister's welfare. The judge turned his attention directly to Olivia. Miss Oakes, you are 3 weeks shy of your 21st birthday, at which time your brother's guardianship would naturally terminate. Given the circumstances presented, I see no reason to prolong this arrangement. Hope bloomed in Olivia's eyes as Judge Wilson delivered his ruling. I hereby dissolve the guardianship of Vernon Oakes over Olivia Oakes, effective immediately. Miss Oakes is entitled to take possession of her inheritance as stipulated in her father's will, including the eastern section of the Oakes Ranch and all financial assets designated for her. Vernon surged to his feet. This is outrageous. She's been influenced by that saddle tramp. She can't manage land on her own. Sit down, Mr. Oakes, the judge commanded sharply. Your sister appears perfectly competent to me, and your behavior today only reinforces my decision. He turned back to Olivia. Miss Oakes, you are free to go where you please and to manage your affairs as you see fit. Tears of relief welled in Olivia's eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. As for the charges against Mr. Foster, the judge continued, they are dismissed. Miss Oakes has testified that she left willingly, and there is no evidence to contradict her account. Vernon's face contorted with fury. This isn't over, he snarled, storming from the courtroom with Fleming trailing behind him. Outside the courthouse, Hargrove shook Ethan's hand and embraced Olivia. A complete victory, he said, beaming. I'll draw up the necessary papers to transfer your property immediately. What about Vernon? Ethan asked, still concerned. He didn't seem ready to accept the ruling. Hargrove's expression sobered. He has no legal recourse now, but that doesn't mean he won't try something desperate. I'd advise caution until everything is formalized. They spent the afternoon with Hargrove, signing documents and making arrangements for Olivia to take possession of her land. The eastern section of the ranch was prime property with good water access and excellent grazing land. Your father knew what he was doing, Hargrove commented as they reviewed the boundaries. He gave you everything you'd need to build a successful operation of your own. That evening, over dinner in the hotel restaurant, Ethan and Olivia allowed themselves to truly celebrate for the first time. To freedom, Ethan said, raising his glass. And new beginnings, Olivia added, her eyes shining with happiness. They were finishing their meal when a hotel clerk approached their table. Message for Miss Oakes, he said, handing Olivia a folded note. She opened it, her expression changing from curiosity to concern as she read. It's from Vernon, she said quietly, passing the note to Ethan. The message was brief but ominous. The judge may have given you your land, but you'll never enjoy it. A woman alone won't last a month in this territory. Come home where you belong or live to regret your stubbornness. Ethan's jaw tightened as he read. More threats. He doesn't give up easily. No, he doesn't, Olivia agreed. But neither do I. They decided to leave for the ranch the next morning, accompanied by Hargrove, who would oversee the formal division of property. The lawyer had already sent word ahead to the ranch foreman, ensuring that Vernon couldn't interfere with the transfer. Their journey back was filled with both anticipation and apprehension. Olivia was eager to reclaim her portion of her father's land, but Vernon's threat hung over them like a storm cloud. What will you do first? Ethan asked as they rode, trying to focus on the positive. Olivia smiled, warming to the subject. There's a meadow near Silver Creek where Father used to take me fishing. I always thought it would be the perfect place for a house, plenty of water, protected from the winter winds by the ridge, but with a view that goes on forever. Sounds perfect, Ethan agreed, picturing it. What about you? Olivia asked. What would you do with 500 acres? Ethan considered the question. Horses, he said finally, not just breaking them for others, but breeding and training them. Good stock that would build a reputation over time. We could do that, Olivia said softly, together. The simple statement held volumes of meaning. a future opening before them that neither had dared to imagine a week ago. When they reached the Oakes ranch, they were met by the foreman, Samuel Greaves, a weathered man who had worked for Olivia's father for over 20 years. "Miss Olivia," he greeted her with evident relief, "good to have you back safe." "Thank you, Samuel," Olivia replied warmly. "Is my brother here?" "No, miss. He rode out yesterday with Fleming and hasn't returned. Left me instructions to continue preparations for the cattle drive, but nothing else." Hargrove frowned at this news. "Let's proceed with the property transfer anyway. The court order doesn't require his presence." They spent the day reviewing the ranch boundaries and formally documenting Olivia's claim to the eastern section. Most of the hands seemed pleased by her return, many having served under her father and holding a genuine affection for her. "Your brother's been running things differently since your father passed," Samuel explained diplomatically as he showed them the changes to the ranch. "More focused on expansion than sustainability, taking risks your father would have avoided." By evening, the legal work was complete. Olivia officially owned her portion of the Oakes ranch, including the meadow by Silver Creek she'd spoken of so fondly. "I'll ride out first thing tomorrow to see it," she told Ethan as they stood on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. "I'll come with you," Ethan said, "if that's what you want." Olivia turned to him, her expression serious. "What I want is for you to stay, not just tomorrow, but for good." She took a deep breath. "I know it's sudden and you have every right to need time, but I love you, Ethan Foster. I want to build something with you, on my land, our land, if you'll share it with me." Ethan felt as though his heart might burst from his chest. He took her hands in his, marveling at how this brave, beautiful woman had transformed his life in less than 2 weeks. "Olivia Oakes," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been a drifter all my adult life, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. But from the moment I saw you in that window, something in me recognized something in you. I don't need time to know that I love you, that I want to build a life with you." Joy bloomed on Olivia's face as Ethan continued. "I don't have much to offer except my hands and my heart, but both are yours for as long as you'll have them." "That's all I need," Olivia whispered, rising on tiptoe to seal their commitment with a kiss. They were still standing on the porch, lost in each other and plans for the future, when the sound of approaching horses broke the evening quiet. Vernon rode into the yard, followed by Fleming and several men Ethan didn't recognize, hard-faced fellows with the look of hired guns. "Well, isn't this touching?" Vernon called, his voice slurred slightly. He'd clearly been drinking. "My sister and her saddle tramp making themselves at home." Ethan moved slightly in front of Olivia, every sense alert to the danger. Vernon's expression was that of a man pushed beyond reason, his eyes fevered with anger and alcohol. "It's over, Vernon," Olivia said firmly. "The court has ruled. This is my home now, not yours." Vernon dismounted unsteadily, his hand resting on his pistol. "You think a piece of paper changes anything? This is my ranch, all of it. Father meant it for me." "That's not what his will says," Hargrove stated, stepping onto the porch from inside the house. "Miss Oakes has legal title to her portion of the property. Any attempt to interfere with that will put you on the wrong side of the law, Mr. Oakes." Fleming dismounted next, his pompous manner at odds with the tension of the moment. "There are ways to resolve this amicably," he suggested, eyeing Olivia with undisguised avarice. "A marriage would unite the properties again, keep everything in the family, so to speak." "I'm not marrying you, Mr. Fleming," Olivia said coldly. "Not now, not ever." Fleming's face hardened. "Then perhaps we'll have to persuade you by other means." At his signal, the hired guns dismounted, spreading out in a way that made Ethan's skin crawl. This had been planned. Vernon and Fleming had come prepared for a confrontation. "Samuel," Ethan called to the foreman who stood watching from near the stables. "Fetch the men." Samuel nodded, disappearing into the bunkhouse. Moments later, the ranch hands began to emerge, sensing the brewing conflict. Vernon laughed harshly. "You think my own men will stand against me?" "Not your men anymore," came Samuel's steady reply as he returned with a rifle in hand. "Miss Olivia's father treated us fair. We aim to do the same for his daughter." One by one, the ranch hands moved to stand with Samuel, forming a line between the house and Vernon's hired guns. It was a clear statement of loyalty that seemed to shock Vernon momentarily. "You're making a mistake," Vernon snarled. "All of you." "The only mistake was thinking you could bully your sister forever," Ethan said, stepping forward. "It's finished, Oakes. Take your friend and his hired guns and leave while you still can." For a moment, it seemed the confrontation might erupt into violence. Vernon's hand twitched toward his gun and Ethan tensed, ready to move. Then, unexpectedly, Fleming broke the tension. "This is becoming absurd," he declared, looking decidedly uncomfortable with how the situation was developing. "I was led to believe this would be a simple matter of persuasion, not an armed standoff." He turned to Vernon. "I'm afraid I must withdraw my interest in this arrangement. The property isn't worth bloodshed, and your sister's objections seem rather fixed." Vernon's face contorted with disbelief. "You coward, we had a deal." "Business," Fleming corrected primly. "And business requires practicality. This situation is no longer practical." He remounted his horse. "Good evening to you all. I believe I'll return to town." As Fleming rode away, the balance of power shifted perceptibly. The hired guns, sensing their employer's withdrawal, looked to Vernon with uncertainty. Vernon's rage, momentarily directed at Fleming's retreating form, swung back to Olivia and Ethan. For one terrible moment, Ethan thought he might draw his pistol regardless of the odds. Instead, Vernon seemed to deflate, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured balloon. "This isn't over," he muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Yes, it is," Olivia said firmly. "Go back to your half of the ranch, Vernon. Manage it as you see fit, but leave me and mine alone." With a final venomous glare, Vernon mounted his horse and signaled his hired guns to follow. They rode away into the gathering darkness, leaving an uncertain peace behind them. Samuel approached the porch once they were gone. "Miss Olivia, the men and I would be proud to help you set up on your land if you'll have us." Olivia smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her tense expression. "I'd be honored, Samuel, and I promise to treat you all as fairly as my father did." That night, as Olivia and Ethan sat before the fire in the main house, they began to sketch out plans for their future. The meadow by Silver Creek would indeed be the site of their home, a modest house to start, with room to grow as their family and fortunes did. "Vernon will come around eventually," Olivia said, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "He wasn't always like this. Father's death changed him." "Grief affects people differently," Ethan acknowledged, "but that doesn't excuse what he did to you." "No, it doesn't," Olivia agreed. "But he's still my brother, the only family I have left besides my aunt in Denver." Ethan took her hand, his expression serious. "Not the only family, not anymore." Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes. "Ethan Foster, are you proposing to me?" "Not very well, apparently," he said with a self-deprecating smile. He slid from his chair to one knee before her. "Olivia Oakes, will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, support you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life." Tears of happiness welled in Olivia's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "with all my heart, yes." The next morning, they rode out to the eastern section of the ranch, accompanied by Samuel and several hands who had volunteered to help establish Olivia's claim. The meadow by Silver Creek was even more beautiful than Ethan had imagined, a gentle slope of land carpeted with wildflowers. The creek cutting a silver path through it, the distant mountains providing a majestic backdrop. "This is it," Olivia said, dismounting and turning in a slow circle to take in the view. "This is where we'll build our home." Ethan joined her, seeing the land through her eyes and his own, not just as it was, but as it could be. A house there, near the shelter of those trees. Corrals for the horses he would train. Gardens that would thrive with Olivia's care. Children someday running free across the meadow. "It's perfect," he agreed, slipping an arm around her waist. Samuel approached, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. "Your father used to bring you here when you were just a little thing," he recalled. "Said you'd sit by the creek for hours, making up stories about the fish and the birds. He always had a special fondness for this spot." "I remember," Olivia said softly. I think he knew even then that this would be my place someday. Work began immediately. The men set up a temporary camp while the first trees were felled for lumber. Ethan, who had helped build more than one structure during his years of drifting, took charge of the house plans, working with Olivia to design a home that would serve them well. Word spread quickly about the new venture on the Eastern Oaks land. Neighbors rode over to offer congratulations and assistance. Even in the relatively sparsely populated territory, community bonds were strong, and many had respected Jonathan Oakes and were pleased to see his daughter claiming her inheritance. As the weeks passed, Vernon remained conspicuously absent. Reports from the main ranch suggested he had thrown himself into preparations for the cattle drive, avoiding any mention of Olivia or her portion of the land. He'll need time, Olivia said when Ethan mentioned this. Vernon has always struggled with change. By early summer, the framework of their house stood proudly on the meadow, and the first corral had been completed. Ethan had already acquired 2 promising mares and was in negotiations for a stallion with bloodlines that made experienced horsemen take notice. Their wedding took place on a perfect June day, with the half-built house and the mountains as their backdrop. Judge Wilson himself rode out to perform the ceremony, expressing satisfaction at seeing the fruits of his ruling. Justice is often an abstract concept in these territories, he told them after pronouncing them husband and wife. It's gratifying to see it take such concrete form. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with neighbors and ranch hands joining in the festivities. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden rays across the meadow, Ethan noticed a solitary rider approaching from the direction of the main ranch. Vernon Oakes dismounted at the edge of the gathering, looking uncomfortable and out of place. He carried a large package wrapped in brown paper. The music and conversation faltered as people noticed his arrival. Olivia, who had been dancing with one of the neighboring ranchers, stopped mid-step when she saw her brother. For a moment, no one moved. Then Olivia crossed the space between them, her wedding dress billowing slightly in the evening breeze. "Vernon," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "I didn't expect you." Vernon shifted awkwardly, his gaze not quite meeting hers. "Didn't plan to come," he admitted gruffly. "But then I remembered something." He thrust the package toward her. "This was Mother's. Father always said it should go to you on your wedding day. Well, it doesn't matter now. It's yours." Olivia took the package, unwrapping it carefully to reveal a beautiful hand-stitched quilt in a pattern of stars and moons. "Mother's wedding quilt," she breathed. "I thought it was lost. Been in the cedar chest all these years," Vernon said. "Father made me promise to keep it safe for you." Ethan had joined them by now, standing supportively at Olivia's side. Vernon glanced at him, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. "You'll take care of her?" he asked abruptly. "With everything I am," Ethan promised. Vernon nodded once sharply. "Good," he turned back to Olivia. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "About many things. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just afraid of losing the last piece of our family." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "You haven't lost me, Vernon. I'm still your sister. That hasn't changed." Something in Vernon's rigid posture seemed to soften slightly. "The cattle drive leaves next week. I'll be gone most of the summer, but when I return, perhaps we could talk, try to find a way forward." "I'd like that," Olivia said softly. Vernon nodded again, his expression still guarded but no longer hostile. "Congratulations to you both," he said formally, then turned and mounted his horse, riding back toward the main ranch without looking back. Ethan wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders as they watched him go. "That was unexpected." "A beginning," Olivia said, hope coloring her voice. "Not forgiveness, not yet, but a beginning." As darkness fell and lanterns were lit around the celebration, Ethan led his bride in a dance beneath the stars, the same stars stitched into her mother's quilt that would soon cover their marriage bed. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her gently across the grass. "More than I ever thought possible," Olivia replied, her face radiant in the lantern light. "This land, this home we're building, it's everything I dreamed of when I was locked in that room." And it's only the beginning, Ethan promised, drawing her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future. 5 years later, Ethan Foster stood on the porch of the house by Silver Creek, watching his wife walk hand in hand with their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, through the wildflower meadow. The little girl's delighted laughter carried on the summer breeze as she attempted to catch butterflies that always fluttered just beyond her reach. The house had grown along with their family, additional rooms added as their prosperity increased. A wide wraparound porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the mountains. The Foster Horse Ranch had established itself as one of the premier breeding operations in the territory, with buyers coming from as far as California to purchase their stock. Vernon rode up the lane, his relationship with his sister slowly mended over the years into something resembling family again. He dismounted with a smile, accepting Emma's enthusiastic greeting as she abandoned her butterfly chase to run to her uncle. "Uncle Vernon brought you something," he told the little girl, reaching into his saddlebag to produce a small wooden horse, beautifully carved and painted. As Ethan watched his family, the family he'd never expected to have, he thought back to that fateful day when he'd first seen Olivia's face in the window of her prison. One decision, one moment of courage, had changed both their lives forever. Olivia caught his eye across the meadow, her smile as radiant now as it had been on their wedding day. With Emma chattering excitedly to Vernon, she made her way back to the porch, stepping into the circle of Ethan's arms. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" she asked, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "About doors," Ethan replied. "The ones that lock us in, the ones we break through, and the ones that open to everything we never knew we wanted." Olivia's smile deepened with understanding. "I'm glad you broke my door, Ethan Foster." "So am I," he said, bending to kiss her as the Wyoming sun bathed their home in golden light. "So am I."